A breakthrough discovery of a brand new organ in our body could transform the treatment of digestive diseases. Known as the mesentery, it was previously thought to be just a few fragmented structures within our digestive system, but scientists have realized it is, in fact, one contiguous organ. To talk more about this, I was joined earlier by Dr. J. Calvin Coffey. He's a professor of surgery at the University of Limerick, Ireland, who made the discovery. Listen to what he had to say.
I think probably the most important thing that we need to know, Manila, is that we have clarified its shape, its structure, and we've demonstrated that far from being comprised of multiple separate parts, it's actually comprised of just one distinct entity. And because we were able to clarify its structure, we were then able to clarify some aspects of its function. And when you can put structure and function together, then you can make a strong argument then for reclassifying or redesignating this structure as an organ in itself.
And what is the actual function of this organ? What's the purpose of this thing?
So it has multiple functions. Probably the two most important functions are, firstly, it's located between the intestine and the back wall of the abdominal cavity. And what that means is that it keeps the intestine connected to your body, but it actually keeps it at a distance, so to speak. So it's connected, but at the same time, it's not directly attached. And what that means is that the intestine can contract and it can relax in order to propel food and contents downwards. The second important function is that as we walk around and get a cup of coffee or take a book from a shelf, our intestine actually follows a spiral conformation. So your small intestine is located in the middle, and the right colon is on the right-hand side, and it goes from down below, low down in your abdomen, up to under your liver. And then it goes across the top and then back down on the left-hand side. And it does that because the mesentery has that particular conformation. If we didn't have a mesentery, and if it didn't have that conformation, then every time you stood up, your intestine would fall down into the pelvis and probably not be very functional.
Oh, interesting. So the mesentery essentially acts sort of as a bumper, sort of, and keeps things in place. Am I understanding this right?
Yeah, very good. It actually keeps things hitched up, and it keeps the conformation of the intestine so that it allows the intestine to function. It allows it to contract and propel the contents of the intestine from the top down to the bottom.
And will this new organ, is it going to play a role in perhaps treating any sort of ailments, or can it be, is it attached to anything else that so far might help?
So because we now have a clarification of the structure of the mesentery, this means that we can actually standardize surgery on the small and the large intestine. That means that we can actually teach surgery of the small and large intestine, we can conduct it, and we can do this a lot more safely. So that has implications for inflammatory bowel disease, for Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and any condition that affects the large or the small bowel. It has implications for all of these. And that's probably the most important aspect of this. Secondly, though, it gives us a new perspective or a frame of reference, and we can interpret different diseases such as Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis in the light or in the context of this new frame of reference and this new model. And that's already helping us in terms of making identifying in these conditions, and it's helping us to generate new modalities of treating them.
Now, how did you go about making your discovery? How many people did you, did you test, did you look at before you realized that this was an actual organ?
We did a study in the Cleveland Clinic, and also when I came back here to Limerick, we continued the study. And the idea of the study was to actually look at the shape of the intestine. And we did that in, if I'm not mistaken, about 109, 110 individual patients. And then we demonstrated the structure there. We then collaborated with a group in Galway in Ireland, in the National University in Galway in the anatomy department, and we collaborated with Professor Peter Dockery, and we repeated aspects of this particular study in cadaveric studies, so in cadavers, and we demonstrated the same shapes there. So I guess you're talking about a total of about 120 separate specimens, so to speak. But we've repeated the study in every surgery that we do, and we've repeated the principles and the actual anatomic findings in every operation that we do in general.
And last question for you is what I found perhaps kind of eyebrow raising was that this organ, or at least this tissue, was actually described by Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
How come it wasn't classified as an organ until just now?
Well, Da Vinci drew it remarkably. He depicted it correctly back in the 1500s. Unfortunately, in about 1850, an inaccurate description of the mesentery was put down. That became the dogma, and that was indoctrinated over the last 150 years in all reference anatomic and surgical textbooks. In the recent past, we've demonstrated that that's actually incorrect, and we've clarified the structure. In the past, it was felt that the mesentery was comprised of multiple separate components. And what we've demonstrated is that it's not. It's actually comprised of one single entity. And that entity has a beginning and an end point. And at a certain age, it reaches approximately 6 feet or 2 meters in length. So it's a substantive and distinct entity. And because we identified its structure, we were then able to identify its function. And its function is essential to life. So if you put those two things together, you have the components of the definition of an organ in itself.
Wow, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us today to share your discovery with us. Dr. J. Calvin Coffey, Professor of Surgery at the University Hospital in Limerick, Ireland. Thank you, sir.
Oh man, that guy is a total pain in the mesentery. You know what I mean? What's up, D-News friends? Trace here. Last year was crazy. I mean, at the start of 2016, we had like 50-some organs tucked into our bodies, according to Merck. But by the end of 2016, we had one more, the mesentery. That's right. Science has just reclassified the mesentery from a group of tissues into an organ. You likely have no idea what the mesentery is, which is fine. Just know it's a fold in the lining of your abdomen, as if it wasn't crowded enough in there already. And it suspends and attaches intestinal organs to the abdominal cavity. It also transports lymph and blood to the gut. One of the first to describe the mesentery was Leonardo da Vinci, and throughout history, doctors have debated whether each part of it is individual, like each intestine has its own, or if it was one complete thing. In a new study in the Lancet Gastroenterology and Hepatology, researchers finally lit the mesenteric candle, outlining and clarifying the mesentery's structure from a bunch of individual tissues into one organ. They claim that while its specific function, aside from suspension, is unknown, it's definitely all one thing. Once the study was published, I guess that makes it official, reversing over 100 years of anatomy, as it says in the study. Woo! Celebrate! I say I guess because there's not exactly some worldwide regulatory group for organs. We just decide that something is a system, an organ, a tissue, or a group of cells based on what it's made of. We all know what cells are. They're the most basic form of life. But when enough cells with a similar function and construction get together, they become a tissue. Then, if different tissues get together and start working, that is an organ. Organs together, that's a system. You want some examples? Great. Red blood cells, they're cells. But when taken together, they're considered connective tissue. But the platelets and antibodies and white blood cells and everything else all together, those need blood vessels to move through the body. Blood vessels are collections of different tissues and thus are organs. And of course, the heart is an organ. Taken together, these organs and tissues form a part of the circulatory system. You get it? So this new organ, which hasn't been acknowledged as much as of late, according to the lead researcher, has now been defined as a group of tissues working together inside the gut, which is exciting, though the discovery of new body parts, it does happen. In 2015, a study was published in Nature detailing a possible new part of the body, a lymphatic vessel system that drains the brain itself. Previously thought not to exist, it was right there in the mouse brain from this study. We should have it too, they figure, but we just didn't know these central nervous system lymphatic vessels were there. Chances are the mesentery's designation isn't going to be life-changing for you, but we'll see. The incredible thing about organs is that once we realize something is an organ, we can diagnose disorders and diseases using that organ as a basis. For example, understanding that there are central nervous system lymphatic vessels in the brain could help people suffering from MS, Alzheimer's, or autism. So once researchers determine exactly how the mesentery normally works, then they can figure out what is abnormal and begin to build the field of mesenteric science. That's so cool. And that could have implications for abdominal diseases. In fact, it's already started. The lead researcher convinced Gray's Anatomy of the Human Body, that's Gray's with an A by the way, that the mesentery was an organ last year when they updated their manual. So now med students may only know it as a single organ. And history marks yet another tiny turning point in the twisting bowels of science. Which sort of begs another question. Why isn't all scientific knowledge free? Luckily for you, we looked into it here. What do you think about our new organ? Sexy? Keeping you in suspense? Really got you in the gut? I'll stop. Tell us in the comments. Please subscribe for more D News, and thanks for watching.